Okay, settle in. Because this story still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. It's not something I experienced directly, but it's a first-hand account that was shared with me by a woman named Janet a few years back. And trust me, Janet wasn't the type to make things up. She was a practical, no-nonsense kind of person, a retired nurse who had seen her fair share of stressful situations, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for what she encountered. It happened back in the fall of 2018. Janet had decided to take a solo road trip through the Appalachian Mountains. She loved the changing leaves, the crisp air, and the feeling of being alone with her thoughts. She wasn't aiming for any specific destination, just letting the winding roads guide her. One evening, as dusk began to settle, she found herself in a particularly remote area of West Virginia. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep orange and purple, but the woods on either side of the narrow road were already thick with shadow. Janet had been driving for a good part of the day and was starting to feel tired. She spotted a small, weathered sign indicating a state park campground a few miles ahead. Figuring that would be a safe and convenient place to spend the night, she turned onto the gravel road leading into the park. The further she drove, the more isolated it felt. The trees loomed tall and dark, their branches intertwining overhead like skeletal fingers. The only sound was the crunching of her tires on the gravel and the gentle hum of her aging Subaru. She finally reached the campground, and it was eerily deserted. There were maybe 5 or 6 campsites scattered amongst the trees, each with a picnic table and a fire pit, but not a single tent or RV in sight. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cool evening air ran down her spine. It felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. Despite her unease, Janet decided to stay. It was getting dark quickly, and the thought of driving back out through those winding, shadowed roads didn't appeal to her. She chose a campsite near the entrance, a little more in the open, hoping that would make her feel safer. She set up her small tent, a familiar and comforting task, and then started a small fire in the pit, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. She ate a simple dinner of a sandwich and some fruit, the silence of the woods pressing in on her. The usual sounds of the forest, crickets chirping, owls hooting, seemed muted, almost absent. It was a heavy, expectant silence that made the hairs on the back of her neck prickle. As the night deepened, the fire dwindled, and the shadows grew longer and more distorted. Janet retreated into her tent, feeling a growing sense of unease. She tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig outside her tent sent a jolt of anxiety through her. Then, she heard it. It started as a faint sound, almost like a whisper carried on the breeze. It was low and guttural, and she couldn't quite make out what it was. She held her breath, straining to hear over the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The sound grew slightly louder, closer. It wasn't quite a growl, not quite a moan, but something in between, something deeply unsettling. It seemed to be coming from the woods just beyond her campsite. Janet's heart hammered against her ribs. She fumbled for her flashlight, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She flicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness, but all she saw were the dense, unmoving trees. The sound came again, closer this time. It was definitely a vocalization, but unlike anything she had ever heard before. It sounded pained, almost desperate, but also somehow predatory. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Janet. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that whatever was out there was not normal. She lay frozen in her sleeping bag, the flashlight clutched tightly in her hand, listening as the strange sounds circled her campsite. Sometimes they would be close, just beyond the thin nylon of her tent, and then they would fade away into the distance, only to return a few minutes later. The worst part was the feeling of being watched. Even when the sounds were further away, Janet had the distinct impression that something was out there, its unseen eyes fixed on her tent. She could almost feel its presence, a heavy, malevolent energy that seemed to seep through the fabric. Hours crawled by. Janet didn't dare to move, barely even to breathe. She kept the flashlight trained on the tent flap, her eyes wide and straining in the darkness. The strange vocalizations continued sporadically throughout the night, each one sending a fresh wave of terror through her. Just before dawn, as the first faint light began to filter through the trees, the sounds finally stopped. The silence that followed was almost as unnerving as the noises had been. Janet lay there for a long time, afraid to move, afraid that whatever had been out there was still lurking in the shadows. When the sun finally rose, casting long, pale rays through the trees, Janet cautiously unzipped her tent. She peered out, her eyes scanning the surrounding woods. Everything looked normal. The trees stood silent, the leaves rustled gently in the morning breeze, birds began to chirp tentatively. There was no sign of whatever had terrorized her throughout the night. But the feeling lingered. The air still felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. Janet packed up her campsite quickly, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. She didn't eat breakfast, didn't even stop to use the restroom. She just wanted to get out of there, as fast as she could. She practically sped out of the campground, not stopping until she was miles away, back on the main highway, surrounded by the normalcy of other cars and the familiar sounds of civilization. Janet never went back to the Appalachian Mountains alone after that. She told me that even years later, the memory of that night still haunted her. She couldn't explain what she had heard, what she had felt. She considered the possibility of animals, but she knew in her heart that it was something else, something unnatural. She shared her story with me because she said she needed someone to believe her, someone who wouldn't just dismiss it as a bad dream or an overactive imagination. And honestly, listening to her, seeing the genuine fear still etched in her eyes, I did believe her. Have any of you ever experienced anything like that? That feeling of being utterly alone and vulnerable in the face of something unknown? Have you ever heard a sound in the wilderness that you just couldn't explain? Please, share your own chilling encounters in the comments below. You never know who else might have experienced something similar, and maybe, just maybe, we can find some comfort in knowing we're not alone in these unsettling experiences. Okay, that was the gripping story Janet shared with me. Now, let's delve a little deeper into the context surrounding such encounters and explore why these first-hand accounts can be so chilling. The Appalachian Mountains, where Janet had her terrifying experience, are a vast and ancient mountain range stretching across the eastern United States. They are steeped in history, folklore, and a sense of wildness that can be both beautiful and unnerving. This region has long been associated with tales of strange creatures, unexplained phenomena, and a deep, primal connection to the natural world. West Virginia, in particular, has a rich and often mysterious history. Its rugged terrain, dense forests, and isolated communities have fostered a culture of storytelling, where legends of mountain men, strange beasts, and lingering spirits abound. It's a place where the veil between the known and the unknown can feel particularly thin. Janet herself was a credible witness. As a retired nurse, she was trained to observe, to remain calm under pressure, and to rely on her senses. She wasn't prone to flights of fancy, and her matter-of-fact recounting of the events lent a significant weight to her story. The fear in her voice and the lingering unease in her demeanor were palpable, convincing me that she had indeed experienced something truly frightening. The details of her encounter are classic elements of a chilling first-hand account: isolation. The deserted campground amplified her vulnerability and the sense that there was no one to help her. Unexplained sounds. The guttural, unidentifiable vocalizations created a sense of primal fear, tapping into our innate anxieties about the unknown predators lurking in the darkness. Feeling of being watched. This is a common element in many paranormal or unexplained encounters, suggesting an unseen intelligence or presence. Lack of physical evidence. The absence of any tracks or other signs the next morning only added to the mystery and the unsettling feeling that what she encountered wasn't bound by the normal rules of the natural world. Experiences like Janet's often leave a lasting impact because they challenge our understanding of reality. We rely on our senses and our rational minds to make sense of the world around us. When we encounter something that defies explanation, it can be deeply unsettling, shaking our sense of safety and order. Furthermore, the power of first-hand accounts lies in their personal nature. When someone shares their own experience, it carries a weight that second-hand stories or legends often lack. We connect with the vulnerability of the individual, and their fear becomes our own. Think about some of the most compelling scary stories you've ever heard. Chances are, many of them were shared as first-hand experiences, passed down through families or told around a campfire. There's an immediacy and authenticity to these accounts that makes them particularly impactful. Now, I really want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt a similar sense of dread or encountered something you couldn't explain? Perhaps you've heard strange noises in the woods, felt an unseen presence, or had a chilling encounter that still puzzles you to this day. Consider these questions as you think about your own experiences. Have you ever been in a remote or isolated location and felt a sense of unease that went beyond the natural environment? Have you ever heard sounds that you couldn't identify and that seemed out of place in their surroundings? Have you ever had the distinct feeling of being watched when you were alone, even when there was no logical reason for that feeling? Have you ever encountered something that defied logical explanation, leaving you with more questions than answers? What was the setting of your experience? Was it in nature, in an old building, or somewhere else entirely? What details made the experience particularly chilling or memorable for you? Did you tell anyone about your experience? What was their reaction? How did the experience make you feel afterward? Did it change your perspective on anything? Don't worry if your experience seems small or insignificant to you. Sometimes, it's the subtle, unsettling details that can be the most chilling. Even a fleeting glimpse of something unidentifiable or a sudden drop in temperature in an otherwise warm room can leave a lasting impression. Sharing these experiences can be cathartic. It can also help us to connect with others who have gone through similar things, reminding us that we are not alone in our strange encounters. There's a certain comfort in knowing that someone else understands that feeling of inexplicable fear or that nagging sense that there is more to the world than what we can readily explain. So please, take a moment to reflect on your own chilling encounters. No matter how big or small they may seem, I encourage you to share them in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can listen to each other's stories, acknowledge the power of the unexplained, and perhaps even find some shared understanding in the mysteries that lie just beyond the edges of our perception. You never know what we might learn from each other's first-hand accounts. Your story could be the one that resonates deeply with someone else, offering them solace or perhaps even sparking a new line of inquiry into the strange and often unsettling aspects of our world.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, baby, you'll get sick of being